Hello, welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe, and joining me in the Post TV studios are Dan Steinberg of the DC Sports Blog, Brandon Parker, and Scott Allen. Gentlemen, happy Tuesday. Welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be here.
You guys are looking sharp today. Jackets and ties. We're really upping the dress code here. Mike Wise, take note if you're watching somewhere. Let's go ahead and get to the rundown of the show. We're going to start with Redskins. Why not? They got their first preseason game Thursday night. We'll get everybody's thoughts on what to watch for. They're scrimmaging with the Patriots this week down in Richmond, which is kind of a fun deal for the fans. We're going to have a little debate about who you would take first in your fantasy draft. Also, Tom Brady or Robert Griffin III.
Not first overall.
Not first overall,
yeah.
But first, if you had to choose quarterbacks of those two were on your board, which one you would take first. Nationals, we'll talk about how much better they are with Asdrubal Cabrera. And we'll take a look at the bigger Major League Baseball picture, the trade deadline winners and losers. We'll look at USA Hoops in the wake of Paul George's injury and the Wizards both being cut from Team USA as of yesterday. Sort of where you guys fall on the injury risk versus the patriotism debate for players subjecting themselves to these competitions internationally. And then finally, we'll wrap up with PGA Championship. One of the four of us is a golf nerd, so I figured we'd throw that in there with the question about Tiger Woods' health, whether or not he'll play. Obviously, Rory McIlroy is the bigger story in golf right now, but because it's Tiger and because he's undecided and it's the final major of the year, we'll get your guys' thoughts on whether or not he'll play, because I know you guys have burning desire to talk with golf. Right, Dan? All right. Let's Dan, I'm going to start with you on Pat's Redskins season opener, or preseason opener, I should say, Thursday night at FedEx. What are you watching for primarily?
I got the easy job. I think the easiest things to mention are, well, first of all, Deshaun Jackson, who's going to probably play only for 5 minutes or whatever, but
right.
If that. But you want to see if he does anything, I think, in his first time out there and what kind of chemistry he might have with the quarterback. But then, the easy, natural things are you want to see the rookies, Trent Murphy and Morgan Moses, especially. I think see how they, look in their first actual NFL sort of experience. And then I'm interested in the place kicker battle. To the extent that there is one, I think Kai Forbath and Zach Hocker, is that his name? Are we talking about? Seems like, if anything, Hocker has been the better leg so far in practice. But we've had a couple years of Forbath here. So I'm curious if they get any chances and how they do.
Brandon, what are you looking for Thursday night?
Kind of building off what Dan said with Deshaun Jackson. I guess as a whole, how the receivers do together. And also, since, like you said, they're only going to play a couple series and starters, who's in that secondary role, who's going to fill maybe that number 4, number 5 slot. Because, Santana Moss, you can depend on him, but they still need to kind of build towards when he leaves and then having a stronger core. So how they do against the Patriots secondary, and then how the Redskins secondary does, because that's always been a weak point for them. And as we heard, Brady was carving them up,
right.
Understandably, I guess, because it's Brady, but still, you can't do that against everybody. So
yeah, they got to get that pass rush going. What do you got, Scott?
I'll go to another position, the backup running back battle with another rookie.
You took mine.
Oh,
that's what I was going to say. Dan, all right, go ahead.
Lake C-Strunk. Just hearing how much Gruden used Gio Bernard as a change of pace guy in Cincinnati, and we've heard, Lake didn't catch many passes out of the backfield. And at Baylor, is he going to be able to adapt to that offense? Is Chris Thompson going to make the team behind Roy Halou? And then kind of who's going to emerge as this year's Marcus Mason or Marco Mitchell, those guys that just explode in the preseason and get people excited for no good reason leading into the actual
Who was the Hawaii quarterback?
Colt Brennan.
Colt Brennan, okay.
We still see those jerseys around.
Preseason stars. Yeah. There's always somebody. You're right. There's always somebody. And I was gonna say to your point about the running backs, the third down back. Is it going to be Halou? Is it going to be somebody? C-Strunk seems, at least on the first depth chart, pretty buried on the running backs. I guess that's not surprising given that he's a rookie, but that'll be interesting to watch for sure.
And Chris Thompson was he sort of had some flashes last year when he was in his first year back from a knee injury, and then he got the shoulder injury and didn't get to play. But again, it's just brief snippets of training camp. But he has looked fast when he's gotten the ball in his hands. So.
And once that second team gets in, you'd expect to see more reps out of some of the new faces like Roberts. I'm interested to see what he's got, both on special teams.
He's kind of a veteran who's like.
Do you think he's not going to play much for the second string?
If I were him, I wouldn't want. To me, he's the kind of guy that you don't want to be wasting a lot of preseason snaps on. Really, I think you kind of know what you have with him. But.
I guess it depends on how many three receiver sets they have.
Guys like Ryan Grant, and who we've heard good things about so far.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots to watch for.
Yes.
Football
Always.
season's back.
We haven't there's all kinds of questions about who's going to take London Fletcher's role, both in the actual linebacking core and also with leadership. I imagine you probably won't get a huge look at the leadership of the team based on a preseason game no one cares about. But I think certainly the middle linebacking job is going to be kind of interesting.
What about on the sideline? Are you guys interested to see Gruden at all? Sort of just how he's going to sort of take charge of the team on the sideline in his first head coaching
I think
experience?
to me the thing that I would on that, sorry to jump in again, is stuff like the clock management and challenge management and stuff like that, which for all of his experience and accolades, Mike Shanahan wasn't always perfect. That's certainly Joe Gibbs the second time around wasn't perfect. That Zorn had all kinds of issues with. So, I mean, you would like to feel it's easy sitting at home watching on television to know what they should do, but you would like to feel like the person on the sideline has a pretty good grasp of that. And as a first-time coach, that'd be interesting.
They employ enough people on that coaching staff that it shouldn't necessarily be all on Gruden. I know he makes the final call, but you've got to have somebody helping you out with that on the side. I don't know if Shanahan did or not, but those have to be improvements this year over last year.
Shanahan probably overruled the guy.
I was going to say, yeah, he's running the show. Yeah.
All right, well, look at that. We finished that segment early. Let's go ahead and get your thoughts on if you guys are fantasy players or not. We don't normally sort of wade into fantasy football territory on this show, but because Tom Brady and the Patriots are in town, in Richmond anyway, scrimmaging this week, and they have the first game this year, the preseason game on Thursday. I thought I'd pit both RG3 and Tom Brady against each other from a fantasy perspective. Scott, I'm going to start with you on this. If you were debating between those two quarterbacks on which to take, who would you draft?
I think that Tom Brady is certainly the safer choice, but I would go with RG3, taking the strategy of thinking that I could wait a little bit on a quarterback and get someone with a lot of upside who may not run as much as he did in his rookie year, but those valuable rushing points in addition to the three stud receivers that he has to work with this year. Brady, of course, gets Gronk back, but the idea of RG3 healthy in that offense with Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, Andre Roberts, and others, I would go with RG3.
You like that? All right, what do you got?
Yeah, Scott makes some good points. It's kind of tough because, like you said, Brady is kind of the proven guy. He won me a fantasy championship one time, by the way.
How long ago was that, though?
That was when he had was it 50 touchdowns in a season? So that was a given.
Like 5 years ago or something like that?
Right, yeah. It's been a while. But you never know with him and Belichick, because one game Brady could throw for 300 yards, next game he hands it off most of the time. So with RG3, you kind of know he's the focal part of the offense. He's either going to pass, he's going to run. He's got playmakers in Deshaun Jackson and Garçon. So I would say I would agree with Scott and go with RG3 because you feel like you can get at least, depending on the scoring, that's your system, at least 15, 20 points from
Right.
him.
It's not about wins and losses. It's about stats.
Right.
What do you got, Dan?
I quit fantasy football. It feels dirty even to talk about it. I think if you're getting RG3, you're definitely getting another quarterback in that same kind of tier to go with him, and maybe it depends on who that other quarterback would be. To me, my gut is that guy's not going to play 16 games. He hasn't done it in his first 2 seasons. Obviously, last year was kind of weird because he was benched or was he hurt or whatever, but clearly he takes contact, and we haven't seen him be able to play 16 games yet. Tom Brady's played 16 games, I think, 11 out of the last 12 seasons, something like that. Mm-hmm. So to me, if you're kind of taking a later quarterback just so that you don't have to worry about that position, I think Brady is the guy you don't have to worry about it. If you take Griffin, you, I think, probably want to come back with another quarterback right away just to have someone for when he doesn't play, because I don't think he's playing 16.
But to Scott's point, I would agree with you that the weapons, at least that RG3 has, on paper, seem more explosive than Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, and Rob Gronkowski. But Brady puts up numbers with anybody.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I think that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Irrelevant. Doesn't matter who he's throwing to. He can throw to one of us.
I mean, the touchdown here, he had weapons. But he's had superstar fantasy years with mostly generic guys.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them is in jail now. But
yeah, who were catching all the touchdowns that year he was throwing 50?
Well, Moss.
That was Moss.
Oh, that was
Moss.
Randy Moss. That's right. Well, that
I
one.
think Jabbar
That's the
Gaffney
exception,
was-
I guess.
Jabbar Gaffney.
Gaffney, Ocho Cinco was there for a little bit. All right. Let's move on, guys, to the
You
national.
know, just talking about this, does it make me maybe get in the mood to do fantasy football again? No, the answer is no.
Still got room in the league.
I didn't ask you that question, so it's
I was
irrelevant.
curious. I was curious if I would see any like.
He's in denial.
We're gonna have we'll have a fantasy segment for every show going forward to see if we can bring you back, Dan. All right, Major League Baseball's trade deadline was a flurry of activity last Thursday. If you guys are baseball fans, lots to talk about and lots to sort of get excited about. Different than most any other league's trade deadline. Lots more activity. Scott, winners and losers. Give me one team that you thought really improved themselves for the stretch run, and a team that you thought didn't do much when you thought that they would.
Sure. I think Oakland A's stand out as the clear winner even before July 31st, bringing in Jeff Samardzija to that staff, and then on deadline day, bringing in another ace in John Lester. And, I mean, they're set up for just a dominant run to go with that offense. On the losing side, I could throw Nationals fans as a winner, too, because I think the Phillies were a huge loser in basically doing nothing. When everyone thought they were ready to unload and retool with that old roster, Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, A.J. Burnett, Marlon Byrd, really their whole lineup people thought was going to be on the move, and they're still there. So I think the Phillies, I mean, really blew a great opportunity to bring back some young guys to build for next year.
Although they did split with the Nationals, which maybe that was their goal. Keep all these guys. Maybe we can take 2 out of 4 against the
Still
Nationals.
make a run for that wild card.
Give me, Brandon, who do you think were winners and losers?
Well, definitely agree with the A's, and I guess if you go at the simplistic approach of who got the best player, the Tigers with David Price, and you talk about pitching that will take you a long way, and it seems like they're all, as you should be, kind of all about winning now, so he only bolsters that rotation. And I mean, I'm sure there are other people, but the Phillies really do stand out as losers. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, you can't, maybe 5 years ago the roster looked good that you had, but it's 2014, you got to plan for the future.
Dan, give me your thoughts.
I was going to say, to me, the A's are kind of in a little bit of a treacherous spot now because they seem so overwhelmingly dominant at the rotation. If they don't, I mean, if it doesn't happen this year, then what? You know, I think it's almost certainly ratcheting up the pressure even more. To me, the Red Sox are a team that I would look at as a winner because they completely remade their roster and seem now that they're set to be a contender in 2015. They did the exact opposite of what the Phillies did, basically. They got rid of everything, and they brought back a ton of talent. And you know, they're not. This is not for them. This is not gonna like for the A's and for the Tigers. Whether they were winners or losers is kind of going to be determined in October. If it doesn't happen this year, then who knows? But I think the Red Sox certainly should be set up for a couple of years off of what they did, and that's the same reason that I would say the Phillies again as the loser because they had an opportunity to do something similar to what Boston did. You would think, and instead they did nothing. Boston, I mean, their roster next year is not going to look anything like it did in April.
I think Boston has one starting pitcher that was in their opening day rotation still on the team. Everybody else is gone.
Wow. I mean, it makes perfect sense, and that's like I think so many fans of struggling teams want to see something like that happen at the trade deadline. It rarely does.
Absolutely. And you guys mentioned Oakland being sort of on paper just an amazing rotation. Would you guys favor them over just on paper now over Detroit in an ALCS potential matchup? I mean, I think I'm still leaning toward Detroit on the strength of their rotation.
I don't know. I think that has 7 games written all over it, and then
when Justin Verlander is your 5th starter, essentially for the Tigers now, I mean that's saying something.
I think I would have said the A's to begin with, anyhow. And I think their run differential is far and away.
And they have the best record in the American League for sure.
Although the Angels are right on their tail now. A's have been slacking a little bit. The Angels have been red hot. I think the Tigers in that series, I might give a little bit of an advantage, if only for the postseason experience of a lot of those guys in that rotation, whereas the A's, especially Jeff Samardzija. I mean, Lester certainly, but Jeff Samardzija coming over from the Cubs.
They also brought over Jason Hamill, who's got rocked around Camden Yards for a couple of years, too. Let's not forget that.
Puts the Orioles in a kind of strange spot of being a division leader right now. They're being completely ignored, I think, for World Series talk.
They often are,
well, we'll get to that segment.
Other than on Post Sports Live.
That's a perfect segue.
And the DC Sports Blog.
That's a perfect segue for the segment that we have on deck. But let's get to the Nationals first. How much better does their addition in Asdrubal Cabrera. Asdrubal Cabrera. Have you guys figured out how to say his name yet?
That's right.
How much better does he make the Nationals, Dan?
Like 7. He makes them 7 better. I mean, a lot of
7 games.
No, just
That's
7.
the way to quantify
So,
it.
yeah, it's tough to quantify.
7 games.
I mean, the thing is, we're talking about how much better they are than the Nationals without Ryan Zimmerman as of a week ago, not how much better they are than the Nationals that had Zimmerman and Rendon at second. I mean, I think I said this last week, they had to make a move once Zimmerman with the strain, especially we don't know when he's coming back. The Nationals and predictions of when players are going to come back are not always accurate. So, I think that people have said a month maybe was thrown out there, but who knows if that even happens. And they couldn't go forward with Espinosa's bat. Espinosa's a great fielder, obviously, but they had to do something. Cabrera is probably like a league average bat, I guess, but his fielding has already looked
he's made some great
outstanding.
plays in the
Which I think it was a clear upgrade, and it was a position that they had to upgrade, assuming that Zimmerman may not be back during the regular season. It was something they had to do. So it makes them significantly better, I think.
Brandon, do you agree that they're significantly better with
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of in, I forget which team I said, or the Tigers kind of in that win now mold. Because I think most of the Nationals' big players in the next 2 years they're going to have to start re-signing guys, looking for new guys. So, again, like Dan said, Zimmerman's such a big piece. You've got to address that situation. And, I mean, this is DC. Everybody expects you to be in contention now. So they met that need, and they got a good guy. And didn't give away much. I mean, a prospect like Walters, he could develop into something, but I feel like been 3 years, I think, since they traded for him. Why not get somebody that's proven?
All right, Scott, do you agree? I mean, we can't all agree on this here.
Well, what's the not agreeing that they didn't get
Well,
better?
I mean, I just don't know. If you look
You
at
don't think they got
numbers,
better?
244 hitter versus a 221 hitter, I mean, in Espinosa versus, if we just look Espinosa versus Cabrera, I think Cabrera is a better fielder by a little bit. Bat-wise, I'm not so sure I agree that it's significantly better, but what do you think, Scott?
If you want someone to disagree, you have Jose Canseco call in and talk about how Zach Walters is going to be 40-40 and future MVP. But I'm going to have to agree. I think it was a smart move, and I think if you look at their numbers, you're right. The average and the power, the run production, it's similar, but I think the big key for Cabrera and what the Nats needed in replacing Espinosa as an everyday starter is so many fewer strikeouts in more at bats. Too many rallies were just killed by Danny Espinosa, and with the types of guys around Asdrubal Cabrera in the lineup, you don't need him to come in and be a world beater. You need him to hit the ball on the ground, put it in play, move guys over, and he's able to do that a lot more than Espinosa has shown the ability to do.
And as a career shortstop in Cleveland and everywhere he's been, he can also spell Desmond, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility there. And Espinosa coming off the bench, for pinch hitting duties isn't the worst thing either.
I think probably some surprise maybe that they didn't make a second move for a reliever, some kind of arm. I think a lot of people expected that would happen.
A team that did do that is the Orioles. They got a lefty reliever from Boston. There's the segue. Thank you for setting me up, Dan. Let's talk about that. The teams finally wrapped up their 4-game series, interleague play, last night at Nats Park. The Orioles won 3 of the 4, and I know it's early. I know it's August, but what the heck? Let's just put odds out there now. What odds, Scott, do you give on a Beltway World Series? Both teams are in first place by more than 3 games.
Well, first off, I can't decide if I want this to happen or I don't want it to happen.
That's right.
I'd finally be forced to pick a side, I think, or people would forget.
More importantly,
you know what? Pick
where
the
are you
side.
going to be during the World Series, Scott?
Oh, no.
On my honeymoon, watching every game in a bar.
Then you definitely don't want it to happen if you're not even going to be here.
Right, it's going to be a disaster. But at this point, I think both teams are going to win their divisions and avoid that dreaded wild card game. I don't know what the odds are. I guess I'd put it at 15%.
Okay, 15%. That's not
20%. 20%. And that's probably really, really high.
Really high.
That's bold. I like that.
It's the double homer in me. But I think the Nats have a much greater chance of making it, if only for the 2 teams that we talked about as big winners at the trade deadline. I think the A's and the Tigers, to have one of those teams not come out of the AL would be a big surprise.
Well, yeah, and the Nationals are one of the few teams that can throw their rotation up against either of those 2 teams. The Orioles certainly can't. Brandon, what percentage do you give?
Yeah, you went way too high. I say 1%.
1%.
Chance because
that's low. That's way too
it
low.
is. I mean, but you have to factor in the Nationals. Somebody's going to get hurt. It seems to be that's the thing.
He is already hurt. Zimmerman's hurt.
Right. and we thought he was fine and back, and then he's gone again. So I don't want to jinx them, but just seems to be that's the narrative. And then on the Orioles side, like Scott said, it's like a gauntlet for them to go through with the A's or the Tigers or other people like that. So, I mean, it'd be great, it'd be cool, but
don't get your hopes up. All right.
It would be a web traffic monster.
Wouldn't it be awesome?
Yeah. I'm going to be in between them. I would say about like 5%, I think. Maybe like about 20 to 1. Seems to me like, you know, if they are sort of both in the Final Four, then it would be just, if you say every series is a coin flip, it would be what, like 16 to 1 or something, right?
Yeah, if they both win their division, I think that the odds have to go way up. If you believe both are going to win their division, I think you have to say it probably like a 10% chance at least. Yeah.
No, I still stick with 5%.
5%.
Yeah.
You're right. They got to go through a buzzsaw. I think you're about right. I think it's between 10 and 15%, somewhere in there. I mean, anyway, it'll be a heck of a fun time if that.
But significantly higher that one of them will be in the World Series, which
sure.
by itself.
Actually, that's a good tiebreaker for another show. All right, Friday night, guys. Paul George's gruesome injury. Let's move on to USA Hoops. So there's been a debate about whether or not professionals should be playing in these international tournaments because of the injury factor. Obviously, Mark Cuban was pretty outspoken when he talked about, you know, and he's been on the record going back several years, a decade even, saying that the NBA should create their own World Cup of basketball to control and at least profit from these international competitions instead of the Olympics and these FIBA events. Larry Bird, on the other hand, says this is an extremely unfortunate injury that occurred on a highly visible stage. Could have occurred anytime, anywhere. Obviously, these players play in the off-season somewhere, whether it's Berry Farm or, you know, pickup games or summer leagues. What sort of side do you fall on, Brandon? If you had to choose one, do you see any things changing because of this injury as far as the participation in these international events?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you look at, it's kind of ironic how the narrative went as far as you looking at Derrick Rose and saying, first, well, why are you playing in this when you haven't been playing with your team?
Right.
Then in the beginning of the game, he looks great, and people are like, oh, it was good to have this, you know, against the best players, see how you're going to look, and then Paul George goes down. I don't think – I think you kind of have different tiers, like the LeBrons of the world. He's already won a gold medal, obviously. I don't think he really gains anything by being in that. But then you look at the John Walls, the Bradley Beals. Like, they look at this as something to prove that, hey, I belong with the best of the best. So I want to be invited. I want to play. So, you know, again, it's kind of two camps. And also that goes with, I feel like Cuban and Larry Bird are saying different things, but towards the same end as far as Mark Cuban, I don't know him, obviously, but I don't think his argument is more so for Paul George and his safety as the bottom line of the teams and the NBA. And Larry Bird obviously is concerned about Paul George, but he's thinking about his team as well. Like, I just lost my best player. So they're both, at the end of the day, it's about the Pacers and what they can do, but Paul George is kind of lost in that mix of just kind of, and that goes to, again, if you use college players, it's kind of like these guys are just pawns in the bottom line. Do they need to be compensated? I don't know.
Scott, do you see this as the fact that Beal and Wall were cut as a net win for Wizards fans because it takes the injury factor out of play for them?
I guess not. I think it's a net win because they had the experience of being on that stage and playing against guys who are going to go on to the World Cup and play in the Olympics. And next time they try out, I think they'll be in a better situation. Because I think it does go back to the point of if they're not playing there, they are going to be playing somewhere. And this was a freak injury, and it could have happened at Berry Farms. It happened to happen on a big stage in front of a lot of people. But yeah, I think guys are going to play during the summer, whether it's on the Olympic circuit or at home. So,
Dan, if you're Ernie Grenfeld, what are you telling the Wizards players next year?
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned Berry Farm, both of you mentioned it. Bradley Beal was there playing last night. I mean, I would assume that with no trainers around and like blacktop and guys who don't really have anything to lose by going against Bradley Beal, the injury risk I would assume would be higher there. Obviously, they're not quite a high level of play, but I mean, it stinks. But these guys play preseason games. You know, we talk about the regular season being 82 games long and not really mattering. What does a preseason NBA game matter? And if something happens there, would it be any more? Yeah, the All-Star game, the dunk contest.
It's a little less
okay, but
intense
would you
than
feel
the
any?
All-Star game.
Would you feel any better if your guy went down in a preseason NBA game than this?
Right.
I mean, people talk about the goal about, you know, you'd rather win an NBA championship than your resume is going to be defined by an NBA championship more than a gold medal, which is true. But any of these competitions have sort of preliminary stages that just don't matter. And unless you're just going to wipe them all off and say they'll only play in the playoffs and in the Olympic competition, then guys sometimes are going to get hurt in meaningless games.
Do you see it having a tangible effect going forward on the participation?
I can see a big star, a couple big stars looking at that and saying, I don't want to do it, but I don't think the majority will.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've already seen, I guess, with some guys who are in contract years or coming off injury, not Rose, obviously,
right,
who have shied away from it. But no, I don't think this one injury will have any real big effect.
If it was like my favorite player's health at stake, I would much rather him play in a USA preliminary game than an NFL preseason game, for sure.
Yeah, at least you're going to get
that's a
better
separate debate. That's an
practice,
interesting thought. There's meaningless games in just about every sport.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on, guys, to the PGA Championship, and we'll keep this segment short, but the simple question is, Tiger withdrew after 9 holes in the Sunday's final round at the WGC event this past weekend. Obviously, we know how highly Tiger prioritizes the majors. We know he has one goal in his career, which is to catch Jack. He's 4 away in the majors category. Given his health and the fact that he withdrew and he wrenched his back after back surgery and he's only played sort of well in spurts since he's returned, do you think he'll play in the PGA Championship this weekend at Valhalla? Scott?
I don't think he will, and for his sake, I hope he doesn't, given how he looked last week. The fact that he needs to win the PGA to even make the Ryder Cup team.
Right.
So shut it down now and come back, hopefully fully healthy next year, and continue that quest against Jack.
Look at Scott with the Ryder Cup reference, Dan. I bet you didn't have that ready in your notes. Brandon, what do you think? Does Tiger play this weekend?
I mean, again, we know that's all he cares about is the majors. But I think, no, he doesn't play. Looking bigger picture-wise. And I feel like he's been in the situation before where he had to decide, and I think he shut it down. So, yeah, again, what do you care about more? I guess the 5-10 year window that you have left or the Ryder Cup, you might as well just – you're not going to win this week.
Yeah, even if he was healthy, he's not
right.
anywhere near one of the favorites this week.
That's the thing. I wouldn't, and I agree too. I wouldn't see why he would want to come back and risk sort of embarrassment for a gain that seems unclear to me, other than winning the tournament, which also would seem extremely unlikely. But all of us probably have had back injuries at some point. Looking at the way he was walking, the way he was just struggling even to like step into that golf cart, it's kind of hard to imagine that he could be swinging a golf string with the violence that he needs to swing it, in 3 weeks or whatever it is.
Right.
So I would say no.
1 week. It's this weekend.
It's this weekend?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's a short turnaround, which is all the more reason. But I will say,
I was just kind of trying to pretend that it was longer away, so I'd be even more excited when it actually started because I love this.
Oh, you're thinking more like down the road for Ryder Cup. That's what you had on your calendar in September.
Yeah, I guess, so many golf events.
I will note his caddy, Joe LaCava, has been photographed at Valhalla at the course, scouting it out. I mean, he hasn't made that.
You're talking about in like 2 days?
Yeah.
Well, when do guys start playing practice rounds? Wouldn't they be like today?
Today and tomorrow.
So
it's
shouldn't we have a pretty good idea?
This is going to have a short shelf life, this segment.
Jeez.
All right. There you go.
All my studying
look at that.
golf.
That was the spirited golf segment, guys. We should do that more often. All right. For Dan Steinberg, Brandon Parker, Scott Allen, I'm Jonathan Forsythe. Thanks for joining us on Post Sports Live. We'll talk to you next Tuesday, same place, same time.
This week. Jeez, I can't wait.